All right, I guess we are live now. Um, right. Oh, very good afternoon. A very good afternoon, everybody who's joined in this lesson. Today, we are going to be talking about different question types when it comes to reading comprehension questions and management exams. I'll be taking you through different question types and the strategy that we have to adopt to tackle with every question type. Plus, what are the kind of things we can do to increase our efficacy when it comes to solving all these questions? But before we do that, allow me to give you an introduction of the Unacademy platform. Unacademy, as you all know, is India's largest learning platform today when it comes to preparing for different competition exams, different competitive exams. You are at the Let's Crack Management Exams YouTube channel. So, we're going to be talking about different management exams like your CAT, GMAT, NMAT, ZAT, and the likes. Yes. Uh, I am Prankur Arora. I am a trainer and a coach. I've been in the learning industry for a better part of the last couple of years. Um, done quite a lot of stuff when it comes to these organizations, consulted with them to increase the productivity of their employees, increase the level of cohesion and communication of their employees. Some of the organizations that I've consulted for include uh, Interglobe, Becton Dickinson, Marico, PGCIL, FMC Corp, very many different industries. I am also a published author. I wrote this book called It's Not Funny. It's a work of satirical fiction. Was reviewed positively by the likes of Biswapati Sarkar, Papa CJ, Rohini Lal, you know. So if you're fond of fiction or if you're fond of dark sardonic humor, existential humor, then be sure to check this book out. It's available on Amazon. I also hold advanced certifications in facilitation from an organization called Leadership Management International. LMI is perhaps the world's largest organization when it comes to transformational leadership. Um, and I run a production house called Tamasha Entertainment. So that's pretty much about me. Welcome aboard this journey of learning, uh, where we're going to be talking about various aspects of verbal aptitude and reading comprehension. Today's lesson is focused on reading comprehension. When it comes to the pedagogy, there are quite a lot of things that help an academy stand out, right? Some of those things include giving you access to daily live classes where you get to chat with your educator, engage in discussions and doubt clearing, all of it happening in real time, right? We also have a system of conducting various tests and quizzes so that we help you evaluate your performance, right? Because once you give these tests and quizzes, we'll give you reports, in-depth reports, analysis of your performance with stuff like the amount of time you're spending on every question, right? What is your accuracy when it comes to verbal aptitude versus uh, logical reasoning versus quant, right? So section wise scores as well. So all of this will help you develop perspective about your learning journey, right? Will help you do course correction if need be. All the courses on the platform, they're all structured courses. They're audited by subject matter experts, and the educators are all credible people who are creating these courses. Plus, with one subscription, you get unlimited access to anything and everything. All kinds of live and recorded courses that you can access from the comfort of any of your devices. As I was saying, we've got very credible educators who've mentored aspirants successfully into various top tier business institutions like your IIMs and your MDIs and your XLRIs, right? You can experience live classes for free and then decide for yourself whether you want additional benefits that come along with these live classes once you take a subscription. New batches, new courses, they keep on going live on the platform on a daily basis. Now, the important things, we've got educators who teach in vernacular languages as well. So if you're not as comfortable with English or Hindi, you can opt for any of the vernacular languages, regional languages that you're comfortable with. You design your own schedule, right? You have the complete ownership of your learning journey, complete responsibility, right? You decide the kind of courses you want to partake. You decide the educators you want to learn from, and all we do is we send you those timely reminders and those push notifications so that you don't really miss out on anything that you've set your eyes on. Plus, because this is all happening online, you can learn anytime, anywhere, right? You can watch recorded courses online, offline. You can download them, right? So all of that can be done, and so your learning happens according to your own comfort levels. So during a live class, as I was saying, interaction, all of the interaction, it happens in real time. Doubt clearing happens in real time. Plus, we launch a lot of live polls that you can participate in, and where you compete for a place on the leaderboard. Um, as I was saying, we conduct live tests and quizzes and mock tests. They're all curated in line with your exam pattern, just to measure your progress, evaluate your progress. So you get to look in the mirror and you see your own reports. You see all the analysis that we do with your performance, and we help you develop perspective. We help you do course correction, right? Plus, with the subscription, you get access to all kinds of class notes with educator annotations, because for example, during this lesson you'll see that I'll be scribbling a lot of stuff on the documents, right? So those documents, those class notes, they are made available to you after every class. Now, coming to the subscription models, right? There are quite a lot of subscription models that the platform follows. You can clearly see that as the time period of your subscription goes up, the cost of the subscription per month is going down, right? So you can clearly see that. Plus, we all understand that any kind of a learning journey is a long learning journey. It's a lengthy learning journey, right? So I would recommend that you opt in for a longer time period, say a 6 month or a 12-month subscription, right? So that you give yourself the opportunity of time to develop the comfort level with the platform, with the course, as well as the educator, right? So it's a three-pronged approach that you have to take. So I would recommend that you opt in for a longer learning journey. Plus, if you use my name as your referral code, my first name, which is Prankur, Prankur, you get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you'd go for. Having said that, let's begin with the lesson today. So today we're going to be talking about different question types pertaining to reading comprehension, right? There are different question types when it comes to reading comprehension questions. Um, but having said that, there is a specific approach that I always recommend when it comes to tackling a passage, right? The first step is, if you've attended the previous two lessons on reading comprehension, you know that the first step I always recommend is that you work the passage. You work towards, taking notes. You work towards making notes after every paragraph. And there's a three-pronged approach that I recommend, which is that your notes, they have to be clear, they have to be concise, and they have to be conversational. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that every passage has a subject, right? The subject is the what or the who of the passage, right? Every paragraph, for that matter, within the passage, there'll be like at least 4 to 5 paragraphs in every passage, right? So every paragraph will have a what and a who, or a who, not and a who, what or a who, right? Now, this will be the subject. This is what your reading comprehension is based on. And then every paragraph will have a why or a how. Why are we talking about this subject, or how are we talking about this subject? That will be the main point of your paragraph. So what I want us to do is, the first step that I want us to take while tackling reading comprehension passages is to work the passage, to work every paragraph and take notes after every paragraph. And those notes that I'm talking about, they have to be like 4 to 5 words maximum. I don't want you to start summarizing the paragraph, to start writing what the paragraph is talking about. I don't want us to do that. What I want us to do that is to make notes after every paragraph. Those notes have to be 4 to 5 words long, and those notes have to be talking about the subject and the main point, right? What is the subject? Who is the passage talking about, or what is the passage talking about? Why is the passage talking about the subject, or how is the passage talking about the subject? This will be your main point, right? So after every paragraph, number one, you have to take notes that talk about the subject and the main point. And those notes, they have to be clear, they have to be concise मैंने पहले ही बता दिया, maximum 4 to 5 words. They have to be clear and they have to be conversational. For example, if the passage is talking about X-rays or gamma rays, right? You don't have to talk about it in PhD terms, because the passage will always be doing that. The reading comprehension passages will be abstract, right? They will be wordy, they will be very, very complex. So if you're making these notes, make sure that those notes are clear and they are conversational. They are not just about paraphrasing what the passage is talking about, but the notes are written in a way, or the notes are understood in a way that you can explain x-rays or gamma rays to a 10-year-old. That is what I want us to do when I mean, when I say clear and conversational, right? So the first step, just to reiterate, the first step is work the passage, summarize the passage, summarize the passage, summarize every paragraph in the passage in not more than 4 to 5 words, where you're clearly writing what is the subject and why is the subject mentioned, or how is the subject mentioned, right? This how or this why will tell you about the author's thought process. One is the author is talking about something. The second is, does the author have an opinion on it? The author is talking about x-rays, but does the author also have an opinion about x-rays, or is the author only giving you the academic brief of what x-rays are and what they're used for? The author can also say, you know what, x-rays are harmful, x-rays should not be used, or x-rays are cheap and x-rays should be used by everybody, right? So passages are very tricky where the author is also expressing the opinion, so there the main point becomes very very important. All right. So keep this in mind. The first step, work the passage. What is the second step? The second step is understand the question task. Right. I'll insert an arrow here. Understand the question task. Now, what do I mean by understand the question task? What I mean by that is that every question, every reading comprehension question will have a subject, right? Subject of the question is where they are, asking you to find information that you need. What kind of information is the question asking, talking about, right? What kind of information? Is it a very specific information they're asking you about? Jiske liye you have to scour through the paragraphs. Is it a very general information that the question is asking about? For example, general information can be what is the structure of the comprehension, or what is the tone of the author, right? These are very general questions. These are not specific questions. Specific question can be, in second paragraph of the passage the author says this, what does the author mean, right? So now you will have to go back to the second paragraph and you'll have to scour for what the author is trying to say, right? So the subject of the question is, what is the kind of information, right? What kind of information do you have to find? That is the subject of the question. Task of the question is, task will actually help you evaluate the information. अब आपने सब्जेक्ट ने क्वेश्चन ने आपको बता दिया that look for this in the passage. Task will help you evaluate what you have to look for, right? For example, you land on ABC from the paragraph. The task of the question is, what do you have to do with the ABC? Do you have to evaluate it? Do you have to weaken it? Do you have to strengthen it, right? Do you have to figure out what the author is trying to say? Do you have to figure out the meaning of ABC, right? So task of the question is, what do we have to do with the information that we find? So break the question down into what is the subject and then what is the task. Subject will help you identify the information that you need from the passage. Task will help you evaluate the information that you find. Evaluate the info that we find, right? So again, just to reiterate, subject of the question is, what kind of information do we have to find or do we have to look for in the passage? Task of the question is, you evaluate the information that you find, right? Once you've done that, once you've broken the question down and you've identified the information, then comes the final step, where you, number one, find the information that addresses the task, and number two, you follow the process of elimination. Now what do I mean by find the information that addresses the task? हमने क्वेश्चन को ब्रेक डाउन करा सब्जेक्ट में और क्वेश्चन को ब्रेक डाउन करा टास्क में. Subject tells us, talk about, for example, in the previous slide I was talking about x-rays and gamma rays. So subject of the question can be usefulness of x-rays in the healthcare sector. Usefulness of x-ray in the healthcare sector. Task is to figure out the author's opinion about the usefulness. One is the author is talking about some research work that is telling us that, over the past 1 year, in 2019, 50 hospitals used x-rays on a daily basis. Task is the usefulness. What is the efficiency of the x-rays? Are the x-rays cheap? Were the hospitals benefiting from the usage of x-rays? Did any of the patients report complications after having gone through the x-ray machines? Right? So task will help you evaluate the information. Now, the first step after identifying the subject and the task, you find information that addresses the task. Right? You find information in the passage, find information in the passage that actually talks about what the author is saying about x-rays. Right? So find information that addresses the task. Once you find that statement, once you find those one or two statements, you can now follow the process of elimination, where you go through every answer option and you figure out whether the answer option is making sense, whether the answer option is in line with the information that you found out. Right? Once you do that, once this is in place, process of elimination becomes very, very easy. But the first step is to find this information after breaking down the subject and after breaking down the question into the subject and the task. Then you find information. After finding information, you follow the process of elimination. So this is the three pronged approach that I recommend when it comes to solving reading comprehension questions. I'll again repeat this. First step, as you're reading the passage, paragraph by paragraph, summarize it. In your summary, all you have to write down is 4 to 5 words. Those 4 to 5 words have to tell you about the subject of the paragraph and the main point of the paragraph. Once you have that, once you have those that the summary in your notes, you can easily figure out the subject of the question, and from the task you don't have to read the paragraph passage again. आपने सब्जेक्ट आइडेंटिफाई करा, टास्क आइडेंटिफाई करा, तो आपको अपनी समरी से पता चल जाएगा, ओके फॉर दिस आई हैव टू गो थ्रू पैराग्राफ 3, not paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. Right? So once you have that summary in place, it is not at all required for you to read the comprehension again. From your summary, you will know whether you have to go to the second paragraph, or you have to go to the third paragraph, or you have to go to the first paragraph. Then after you go to those paragraphs that the question is asking you to go to, you find the information, you find those one or two lines that are pertaining to the question at hand. Those one or two lines help you through the process of elimination, and you easily arrive at your answer options. All right. Remember this three-step approach. This is very, very important and very, very efficient when it comes to reading comprehension questions. I hope you're understanding this. I hope I'm making sense to you, and that you're not zoning out as I'm explaining it all. Right. Now let's look at what are the categories of questions that reading comprehension typically shoots up. The first is the general question. There are typically four kinds of general questions that you will face in your management exams in your reading comprehension. The first is the main idea. Right? What is the main idea of the reading comprehension? What is the main idea of the passage? The main idea typically summarizes what the author wants you to remember. If the author is talking about x-rays, the main idea will be what is the takeaway that the author wants you to have when it comes to x-rays. What is the passage about? Right? So I'll just write down: summarizes, main idea summarizes um, what the author wants you to remember. That's all. That's pretty much it. Main idea summarizes what the author wants you to remember, or in brackets, what is the passage about? What is the passage about? Right? This is the main idea. There are questions pertaining to the main idea that ask you to summarize or ask you to discuss what the passage is about. Then comes the primary purpose. Now, it is different from the main idea, even though, if you read these two phrases, you'll be like, main idea is the same as primary purpose, right? No, main idea is very different from the primary purpose. How is it different? Because primary purpose will tell you uh, why the author wrote the passage, why the author wrote the passage. So if the main idea is saying what is the passage about, the primary purpose is why did the author write the passage, right? This is the what, this is the why, right? Main idea, what is the passage about? Primary purpose, why did the author write it, right? For example, if we are talking about X-rays, the main idea can be the usefulness of X-rays in the healthcare sector. Primary purpose, why did the author write this? The author wrote the passage because the author doesn't really is the author is not a big fan of X-rays, or the author is concerned about the harmful effect of X-rays. That can be the primary purpose. All right, so keep these things in mind, the differentiation between the main idea and the primary purpose. Then comes the structure of the passage. What is the structure of the passage? What is the flow, right? What is the flow? What is the flow? And for that, you don't have to revisit the comprehension. You only have to look at the notes. You only have to look at the summary that you have. Was the author giving opinions? Was the author giving counterpoints? Was the author giving a lot of evidence, right? This will help you narrow down to the flow, right? Does the author give opinions? Is the author giving evidence? Is the author giving counterpoints, right? This is what is important when it comes to identifying the structure of the passage. And finally comes the tone. Even though tonality of the passage is a very, very general question, what is the tone? Tone tone is basically, what is the author's opinion. That will tell you the tone. Author's opinion. Does the author feel strongly about X-rays? Is the author, empathizing with the usage of X-rays? Right? Tone will be dependent on how strongly author feels about the subject. Right? So these are typically the four broad categories when it comes to general questions pertaining to reading comprehension. Typically, you will get main idea the most often, and then you will get, sometimes you will get primary purpose questions also. Structure and tone are relatively less asked. Matlab, the frequency is very, very low when it comes to structure questions and tonality questions. Main idea is quite often. All right, next comes the specific questions, right? Specific questions are where you will have to, more often than not, revisit the passage, right? And when we are talking about revisiting the passage, I'm not talking about reading the entire comprehension again and again. What I'm talking about is, look at your summary, identify what paragraph is pertaining to the question at hand, what paragraph is pertaining to the subject at hand or the main idea at hand, and then you go to that paragraph to answer that question. You don't read the comprehension or skim through the comprehension over and over. All right, having said that, let's discuss what are the kind of specific questions that we have. Now, when we have retrieval questions, these are typically questions that begin with, according to the passage, or find something in the passage. Find this in the passage. Uh, according to the passage. According to the passage is the phrase that is most common use when it comes to retrieval questions. All right, where you have to skim through the paragraph that the subject is pertaining to and you have to find something, right? That is what we mean when we talk about retrieval questions. Then there's inference questions. Inference questions is, imply. Words like imply are used. Infer. What does the author suggest when the author says this, right? These are typically the words that are used in these questions where they are talking about, uh, you know, inference questions. Typically, if you've attended my critical reasoning lessons as well, inference is something we know to be true based on the information that is given to us. You read the paragraph, you read the comprehension, you read the passage. Now, once you've read the information, what do you know to be true out within the options that are handed to you? Yeah, right. So I'll write this down. Something uh, we know to be true based on info, based on the info that is mentioned in the paragraph, right? So inference is something we know to be true based on what we are given, right? And you will have words like imply, infer, or suggest in your questions, where you'll get an idea that, okay, fine, you know what, this is an inference question. For this I have to revisit the paragraph that this question is talking about. Then come the purpose questions, right? Stuff like in order to do xyz, x-rays should not be used, or in order to do xyz, x-rays should be used, right? So in order to, or something like serves which of the following purpose, this quote by the author serves which of the following purpose, right? That is again a very direct purpose question. Serves which of the following purpose. All right. And don't confuse this with the primary purpose of the passage. Primary purpose of the passage is the blanket idea, blanket reason for the author writing this entire passage. Purpose questions are very specific. They're very specific to one or two conditions. They're very specific to uh, one or two connotations. They're not the blanket idea of the passage at all. Very, very specific. So don't confuse between primary purpose of the passage to the purpose questions that we get, where we have to direct ourselves to focus on one or two paragraphs mentioned in the passage. All right. And then this is very self explanatory, which is vocabulary questions, where you have to figure out the meaning of a word or a phrase, right? These are typically complex words or complex phrases जिनका meaning हमें पता नहीं होता, but we can look at the sentence and we can identify that, what, this is the role of this word in the sentence, so maybe this is what it means, right? Sometimes it will be about synonyms, sometimes it will be about antonyms. All right. And then finally, we've covered this in detail quite a bit. uh, Almost 60% of your reading comprehension questions are critical reasoning questions. Critical reasoning questions are evaluation questions, strengthening, weakening questions, analogy questions, assumption questions. I forgot to mention it here. Assumption questions as well, right? So we've covered this in detail. If you are new to my lessons, then I request you to go through, our series on critical reasoning. So we've covered all of it in great detail, great detail. But just to reiterate it here, evaluation questions are where you have to evaluate some information that is given in the paragraph. Strengthening and weakening questions are where you have to basically look for an option that either supports what the author is saying or attacks what the author is saying. Analogy questions are basically comparison questions. So typically, there will be a comparison that the author might be making in the paragraph, and then the analogy question will be basically asking you to follow that same pattern of comparison, right? They'll give you two or three cause effect relationships, and they'll ask you to identify or draw an analogy from the paragraph or the passage, right? Assumption question is basically, there is a premise and there is a conclusion, and then there is a gap in between. and the assumption questions will ask you to identify that gap. That for this conclusion to be true, based on this premise, what what is required to be true here to reach this conclusion? What is that gap, right? How do we fill that gap? So those are your assumption questions. Again, we've covered this in great detail over the past 2 3 weeks. I request you to go through those videos. They're available on this YouTube channel itself. Look for my playlist and you'll reach those critical reasoning lectures. All right. So having said that, guys, let's try and solve a passage now. Let's try and solve a passage. Read this. Don't take more than a couple of minutes, and then once you're done reading it, hit me up on the chat with a yes, and then I'll switch over to the next paragraph. And while you're reading this paragraph, right, draw your summary where the summary needs to identify what is the subject of the paragraph and what is the main point. Summary on 2 lines. What is the subject of the paragraph and what is the main point of the paragraph? Subject again is the who or the what. What is the paragraph talking about or who is the paragraph talking about? Main point is the why or the how. Why is the paragraph talking about the subject, or how is the paragraph talking about the subject? All right. Justice is the first virtue of social institutions, as truth is of systems of thought. A theory, however elegant and economical, must be rejected or revised if it is untrue. Likewise, laws and institutions, no matter how efficient and well arranged, must be reformed or abolished if they are unjust. Each person possesses inviolability founded on justice, which even the welfare of society as a whole cannot override. For this reason, justice denies that the loss of freedom for some is made right by a greater good shared by others. It does not allow that the sacrifices imposed on a few are outweighed by the larger sum of advantages enjoyed by many. Hit me up on the chat with your subject as well as your main point. If you're able to identify what is the subject, what is the main point, hit me up on the chat with your answers. Okay, so to me, what this passage tells me, or what this passage is talking about, is that this passage is talking about the theory of justice, right? This passage is talking about theory of justice, and then they're dissecting it further by talking about laws and institutions and truth, right? And then they're talking about morality, they're talking about welfare of society, but the blanket what or the who is theory of justice. Subject justice. Yes, good job, Anushka. What is the main point? What is the why or the how? Right? What is the why or the how? Main point is the idea is, why are they talking about justice, or how are they talking about justice? Where they are dissecting forms of justice. In what form should justice be present in the society, right? What does justice mean? If you were to dissect it, for example, look at this last line. It does not allow that the sacrifices imposed on a few are outweighed by the larger sum of advantages enjoyed by many. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to basically dissect form of justice. What is the form of justice that the society should follow, right? Basically, the quality of justice is the main point here. Quality of justice. All right. So this is the first paragraph. Let's move on to the second paragraph now. Second and the third para. Right. Identify the subject and the main point for both these paragraphs. Therefore, in a just society, the liberties of equal citizenship are taken as settled. The rights secured by justice are not subject to political bargaining or to the calculus of social interests. The only thing that permits us to acquiesce to an erroneous theory is the lack of a better one. Analogously, an injustice is tolerable only when it is necessary to avoid an even greater injustice. As primary virtues of human activities, truth and justice are uncompromising. So, what is this talking about? What is this paragraph talking about? This paragraph is talking about the form of justice that your society can take. Right? Look at this. The only thing that permits us to acquiesce to an erroneous theory is the lack of a better one. So, what kind of justice theory, right? Kind of justice theory your society can take, right? Forms of justice theory. Therefore, in a just society, the liberties are taken as settled, the rights are not subject to political bargaining or to the calculus of social interests. So, here we are talking about the kind of justice your society can take, right? Main point, uh, main point will be basically that this that uh, an erroneous theory can be taken permits us to take an erroneous theory is the lack of a better one. So you can go ahead with a bad justice theory if you don't have the chance of coming up with a better one, right? Here, injustice is tolerable only when it is necessary to avoid an even greater injustice. All right, truth and justice are uncompromising. So we can take a bad theory we can take a bad theory if we don't have better one. Alright, now let's look at the third paragraph. These propositions seem to express our intuitive conviction of the primacy of justice. One might inquire whether these contentions or others similar to them are sound, and if so, how they can be accounted for. To this end, it is necessary to work out a theory of justice in light of which these assertions can be interpreted and assessed. Again, here we are talking about a theory of justice. Subject is again theory of justice. What theory of justice your society should adopt, right? This is a very complex paragraph, right? But these are the kind you can expect in your management exams, right? So, express our intuitive conviction of the primacy of justice. One might inquire whether these contentions or others similar to them are sound, and if so, how can they be accounted for? To this end, it is necessary to work out a theory of justice in light of which these assertions can be interpreted and assessed. Right? So, you're breaking the theory of justice down in minute terms now. Like, what are the contentions? What can be accounted for and what can be neglected? Right? Stuff like that. Now, this paragraph. Stay with me, guys. Stay with me. Begin by considering the role of principles of justice. Assumptions now. So, subject can be assumption. Assumption that a society is a more or less self sufficient association of persons who, in their relations to one another, recognize certain rules of conduct as binding and who, for the most part, act in accordance with them. Suppose further that these rules specify a system of cooperation designed to advance the good of those taking part in it, then, although a society is a cooperative venture for mutual advancement, it is typically marked by a conflict as well as by an identity of interests. ये जो है although is a trigger word. Then, although our society is a cooperative venture, it is typically marked by conflict as well as by identity of interests. There is an identity of interest since social cooperation makes possible a better life for all than any would have if each were to live solely by his own efforts. Social cooperation gives us better life. There is a conflict of interests, since persons are not indifferent to how the greater benefits produced by their collaborations are distributed, for in order to pursue their ends, they each prefer a larger to a lesser share. Alright, so this paragraph is now talking about the form of society. How can cooperative societies be formed? What is the main point? Main point is the qualities or what the society needs. Society is self sufficient. सोसाइटी में लोगों के पास कोड ऑफ कॉन्डक्ट होता है, सोसाइटी में रूल्स होते हैं, सोसाइटी में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स होते हैं, सोसाइटी में आइडेंटिटीज होती हैं, सोसाइटी में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट होता है इवन व्हेन आइडेंटिटीज आर द सेम, राइट? सो नाउ दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट different qualities or rather different characteristics. That is the main point. All right, now moving on, the last paragraph. A set of principles is required for choosing among the various social arrangements that determine this division of advantages, okay, and for underwriting an agreement on the proper distributive shares. These principles, these principles are the principles of social justice. They provide a way for assigning rights and duties in the basic institutions of society, and they define the appropriate distribution of the benefits and burdens of social cooperation. So now this is like the concluding paragraph. The concluding paragraph is saying we need set of principles, we need arrangements that determine advantages and they underwrite an agreement about the distributive shares. These principles are principles of social justice because they tell us about the rights, and they tell us about the duties of institutions in society. Institutions like the legislature, the judiciary, they define appropriate distribution of benefits and burdens of social cooperation. What is the burden of social cooperation? What are the benefits of social cooperation, right? Why do majorities uh, inflict damage on minorities, and why do minorities need support and empowerment and upliftment, stuff like that. So this is the concluding paragraph. Now if you've understood this all, let's solve the first question, right? This was a lengthy paragraph, a confusion paragraph. Let's solve the first question. The first question is, it can be inferred from the passage that the author believes that one can permit the use of an imperfect theory of justice. Now, if you remember, I think it was the second paragraph or the first paragraph that talked about a situation in which imperfect theory of justice can be adopted by the society, right? What is the imperfect theory? It can be inferred. Again, this is an inference question for which we have to revisit the paragraph. This is a specific question, right? This is not a general question. We'll have to revisit the paragraph. If you've taken your notes, you'd know that this is talking about either the second or the first paragraph, right? The author believes that one can permit the use of an imperfect theory of justice. Option A, under no circumstances. No, this is a strong word. We remember, right? Let's follow the process of elimination. We remember that it was either in the first or the second para where the author said, in this condition we can use an imperfect theory of justice. ये कह रहे हैं under no circumstances नहीं. Author recommended a circumstance where imperfect theory of justice can be used. Only if it would allow for the greater good of the society, we'll revisit the paragraph and see if this was the case. Only if a more just theory can be found, we'll cannot be found. Not can be, cannot be found. We'll revisit and see whenever whenever it is agreed upon by a majority of the society, whenever it would effectively prevent certain injustices. Let's revisit the first and the second paragraphs to arrive at the answer. Read this. And then read this. Right? Look at this. The When Anushka says, see, let's look at it. The only thing that permits us to acquiesce to an erroneous theory is the lack of a better one. Acquiesce to an erroneous theory. Acquiesce means that you give up. You give in to this theory. Erroneous means a stupid theory. So you give in to a theory if there is a lack of a better one. Right? Analogously, an injustice is tolerable only when it is necessary to avoid an even greater injustice, as primary virtues of human activities, truth and justice, are uncompromising. So let's go back to the question at hand. Only if a more just theory cannot be found, whenever it would effectively prevent certain injustices, we don't know that for sure. What we know is that tolerable only when it is necessary to avoid an even greater injustice, right? We are talking about it in a different way. The option is subtly changing the meaning. Whenever it would effectively prevent, and here the paragraph says when it is necessary to avoid, right? Plus this is an extension of the only condition where we accept a not so good theory. We accept an imperfect theory only if a more just theory cannot be found, and if that happens, it is necessary to avoid a greater injustice, not prevent certain injustices, necessary to avoid greater injustice. So E was they're changing the meaning only if it would allow for greater good. We don't know that for sure. Whenever it is agreed upon by a majority, no. Right? Only if a more just theory cannot be found. This is the only acceptable option. We followed the process of elimination. All right, let's go to the next question now. According to of the passage, a society is characterized by all of the following except. If you remember, मैंने लिखा था, we discussed how there was one paragraph that was talking about different characteristics of a society, right? So here they are saying a society is characterized by all of the following except. So 4 out of 5 will give us the characteristics of the society that the paragraph was giving us, only one will not. So self-sufficient individuals, a collaborative effort for common progress, and adherence to certain rules of behavior, a conflict of interest among individuals, a common interest in social cooperation. So let's go back to the passage. These are the different characteristics. A society is more or less self-sufficient, right? Society is more or less self-sufficient. Recognize certain rules as binding in accordance with them. Specify system of cooperation designed to advance good of those taking part in it, so collective good. Conflicts आ गया इधर. Social cooperation आ गया, right? Social cooperation. So everything is here. What is the difference then? What is missing? You look at it, collaborative effort for common progress था, adherence to certain code of conduct था, conflict of interest था, social cooperation भी था. Self-sufficient individuals. We'll go back to the passage. Society is more or less self-sufficient. So self-sufficient are not the individuals but the society. So that is the trick that this question is adopting. Society is self-sufficient, not individuals. So this is the one where this is the one point that the society is not characterized by. Society is characterized by self-sufficient society, not self-sufficient individuals. All right, I hope you're getting my point. And now, the last question of the day, guys. This is the last question of the day. The author implies that in order to ascertain whether convictions concerning the inherent nature of justice are valid, one must. This is, I guess, the last paragraph, right? No, this is not the last paragraph. Okay, this is this paragraph. These propositions seem to express our intuitive conviction of the primacy of justice. One might inquire whether these contentions or others similar to them are sound, and if so, how can they be accounted for? To this end, it is necessary to work out a theory of justice in light of which these assertions can be interpreted and assessed. I think this is a very straightforward question. Again, this was a very specific question where you had to go to the paragraph that was talking about convictions. Read this line. To this end, it is necessary to work out a theory of justice in light of which these assertions can be interpreted and assessed. The author implies that in order to ascertain whether convictions concerning the inherent nature of justice are valid, one must A. Determine the context. No, context was not mentioned in the passage. Uh, Shed light on the role of the principles of justice. Shed light on the role of the. Look at this. If we were to break the question down again, what is the subject here? The subject is convictions. What is the task? That determine one to determine what we must do, right? Task is to determine what we must do. Shed light on the role of the principles? No, the paragraph was not talking about that, right? Meet all of the requirements of a just society? Again, no. Account for the principles of justice? This looks viable. Establish a theory of justice with which to evaluate them. So, out of the two, I have to arrive at one now, right? Let me look at what the one might inquire whether these contentions or others similar to them are sound, and if so, how can they be accounted for? Sound, and how can they be accounted for? To this end, it is necessary. One must do what? One must work out a theory of justice in light of which these assertions can be interpreted and assessed. So, necessary to work out a theory, right? This is what they are saying. Necessary to work out a theory. Account karna hai, but what is the one thing that we must do? We must establish a theory of justice with which to evaluate the convictions, right? So this looks to be the most viable option here. I hope you've stayed put, guys. I hope you've stayed with me throughout this lesson. I'll take you through the process again. I'll take you through the process again. Step वन, summarize the paragraphs. जैसे हमने किया, हमने हर पैराग्राफ का सब्जेक्ट समझा, हमने हर पैराग्राफ का मेन पॉइंट समझा. स्टेप टू, break the question down into the subject. What is the subject of the question? What is the question talking about? What kind of information do you need from the passage? And then what is the task? With the information that you need, what is it that you have to do? Do you have to evaluate? Do you have to draw an inference? Do you have to figure out an assumption? Right? Once you figure out what kind of information you need, find out that information in the paragraph. After you find out that information in the paragraph, follow the process of elimination. So these are the three steps that you've got to follow, guys, to solve reading comprehension questions. This is the end of today's lesson. Now, let me tell you that on Friday, that is tomorrow I am beginning with a crash course on reading comprehension as well as critical reasoning on the Unacademy subscription platform. Tomorrow, 3 to 4 p.m. is the first class, and then it will go on for 10 days straight. 10 days straight, 3 to 4 p.m. We'll be talking about reading comprehensions and critical reasoning. What are the strategies we need to take? What are the things we need to keep in mind? We'll really dig deep to identify the kind of skills we need to master to solve these questions to the best of our ability. So do join in, do tune in for that course tomorrow. I'll see you again. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, stay safe, guys. Stay safe, stay strong, stay mellow. I'll see you. Thank you for tuning in for today's lesson.